I suck at taking my own advice. I'm someone who tends to preach grace and taking your time. I promise you, I don't do either of those things for myself. I've always been someone with crazy high expectations because honestly, more often than not, I definitely achieve them. That means that 97% of the time, I am on go. I see time of rest for myself as an opportunity cost to literally all of the other things that I can get done in my day. I'm a huge planner and always carry around my agenda, and that just I promise you that makes my perception of time miserable. I enrolled in a somatic practices class this semester, and it's once a week for 2 hours, and we get to just talk and be all metaphysical, philosophical, spiritual the entire time. I want to tell you, last week was so hectic. Like, I wasn't even able to look back at my notes. I'm looking at these notes and I remembered a conversation that I had in the somatic practices class. It was our first meeting, I'm pretty sure, and I mentioned the distinction of kairos and chronos. If you stay tuned, I won't only try to explain the premise, or at least my understanding of the concept, but I'll also encourage you to try and live in kairos despite this super chronos time ticking world that we're in. So what's kairos, what's chronos, and why does it sound like I'm about to teach you Greek mythology? Admittedly, this video was inspired by my notes and the notes of the conversation I had in this class that ensued me to bring up kairos and chronos. I didn't do any research before this video, and though it is my understanding that kairos and chronos both appear in the Bible, and obviously they're both ancient Greek names, I really don't know much about the background foundation of these stories. Please feel free to comment down below, whether it's watching this on YouTube or DM me if you have any more context as to what I'm talking about, because I really liked the theory and the lessons that you can get out of it, but there's definitely much more to unpack, and y'all can let me know. Getting straight into it, in this conversation, we were discussing time. And like I said, this was our first conversation of the semester. So the fact that we just had gotten into our little circle and we were all just crisscross applesauce. We're talking about time and how entropy works, specifically in ourselves, and how our bodies are always trying to move against time. Like, there's always this friction between ourselves and our desires and what we want our life to look like and time. And like I mentioned, ever since the semester started, I've really been struggling to, maintain and be in this space of presence and abundance in a world full of deadlines and reports and meetings and times. Even when I'm not physically on go and I'm not physically running around and going from place to place, my mind is always running. And there really has rarely been a moment where I find myself actually at peace or even near it. And my hypothesis today is that that's because I've been living in chronos. Chronos is what we understand and know of time as now. It's the root of the words chronological, chronicle, chronic, words that have one thing in common in regards to time specifically. They measure it. When these words come to mind, at least for me, I'm primed to think about how long something is, or when in a timeline, which I'll get back to, is a certain thing happening. I think minutes, months, hours, days, weeks, years, all of that. When thinking of chronos, I'm thinking of time as a separate entity from me, as a system in which I somehow need to fit myself in. Think of when you're planning something with someone, right? Sometimes in planning, my friends will be like, I'll put you or I'll lock you in for Saturday. And humor me, okay? Because it's gonna sound like I'm dragging it. But it feels like I'm a miniature figurine in a Monopoly game, and they're just placing me in a spot within all of time. Let's now think of a line of time, a timeline, if you will. If we think of a point A, a point B, and either or both of these points being infinite, right? We don't know how many days we have. And if you believe that time, or your presence, essence, existence started at birth, then your point A is probably going to be a constant, but your point B is going to continue extending for an infinite / undisclosed / question mark amount of time. If you're like me and you believe that you've experienced time way before birth, or at least before birth, then your point A is probably also going to be infinite. So point A, point B, potentially both are infinite. And that means that we as humans, or whatever you want to call yourself, are continuously going through this line of time, potentially infinitely amount of times. At some point we have our past, and we have our present, and we have our future. And within these 3 points that we are so used to colloquially talking about, we have an infinite amount of points in between those 3. If we choose to think about it this way, the way that the me of today is different from the me of yesterday, which is different from the me of tomorrow, then that means that we put ourselves in a system where there's an infinite amount of us. And honestly, it's amazing and grandiose and out of this world that sounds like. I'd argue that this form of thinking is honestly incredibly debilitating and tiring. And I say so because it's not that we're allowing ourselves to change, you know? It's not like there's a resistance to change and we're doing it anyways. I'd argue that thinking about it in a timeline and thinking about time as linear, and as you going through this river of time, you're actually forcing yourself to change. Entropy doesn't like when you go into the machine of time and you come out unchanged. Like, that's just not how she works. Like, that's not how she likes to do her thing. Entropy and time, of course, in the way that we are visualizing it and conceptualizing it in this system and society that we're in, they want you to reinvent yourself constantly. And yes, of course, we're ever evolving and changing beings. And change is healthy and very necessary sometimes. But I think it's how we frame this change to happen. Because what if we changed in the now? What would it look like if we made our changes, both of ourselves, of our environments, of anything, for the sake of changing the present and changing the now, as opposed to for the sake of the fear of missing out? And this is exactly where Bestie Kairos comes in, because we all live in a society where we feel like time is constantly running out. In chronos, these changes, these modifications, these reinventions of ourselves come from chasing down this ever escaping time. Because if we're here and we're saying that time is infinite and forever forward propelling, of course it's escaping you. Of course you're running out of time. If she's already here, she's already past the screen when you want her to be here. Now, what if I suggested that time chases us? What if everything we did was so instilled in ourselves, in our experiences, that time had no other choice but to chase us? Like, time, I don't care about you. I don't care about what you're propelling me to go to. I don't care what you are trying to retroactively push me or pull me towards. This is about me. This is me. So you're probably like, okay, Loren, so like, how do we do that though? Because that sounds cute, but like, how? I'm honestly still figuring it out. But if we define kairos as experiences, moments, and deep breaths, and hugs, and embraces from people we love, then I really think that all it takes is to live. Like, I'm not saying to ignore chronos completely, unless you went off the grid and AWOL. Like, you probably aren't going to be ever able to fully escape chronos. We still live in a system where we have to prioritize food and shelter and water and safety and the monetary forms of achieving these things. I can't take that away from anyone. I can't take that away from myself. But a lot of the time we live in our heads. Like a lot of the time I live in my head. We live in what happened yesterday and what could have been said in an argument, or what I could have done when I saw XYZ happening. Thinking and living in my head about tomorrow and what I'm planning on doing, and like, what if this doesn't happen? And just, we always are doing that. This reminds me of Ram Dass's Be Here Now book. This reminds me of literally every cliche that exists in the world of live in the present. And it's because it's true. Like, cliches are cliches for a reason. We spend way more energy than we think we do on trying to catch up with time. But kairos is about moment and opportunity.